You know, it's really interesting. One of my mentors, Carl Polnack, talks about consecrating
Carl.
your space.
Absolutely.
And he does that in terms of practice. But I absolutely believe that that is hyper important on the concert stage as well. And it's that creating that relationship with the audience and making that space welcoming and opening for this kind of storytelling.
And respectful.
Yes.
And respectful. And creating, making an event.
Yeah.
That there is a sense of specialness and wonder. I had the most wonderful experience when they were working on Alice Tully Hall, when they were doing the renovations, and all of the performances, or many of the performances, were moved to the Ethical Culture Building in New York City. And I was debuting Alan Smith's piece, Covered Wagon Woman, which he had been commissioned to do to write for Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society, and it was for myself and piano. Warren Jones was playing piano, and we had a beautiful violinist and cellist, and it was a remarkable experience. We debuted that show there at the Ethical Culture, which is basically everybody sitting in a big room, and not really a stage space, but me just standing there with all these people, essentially like preaching. And this piece is, it's based on the journals of a woman named Margaret Frink, who crossed the country with her husband in a covered wagon. Not in a wagon train, you understand, on their own, which was a completely different thing. And the journals that Alan had searched through to find this particular woman were fascinating. I did a lot of the same reading that he did, and I certainly read Margaret's entire journal, which was wonderful. But these songs followed this amazing journey. And I decided before that show, for the first time, not to put any words in the program. That's the first time I did it. And Alan agreed, Warren, we all agreed that was fine.
Now, what year was this?
I can't, it was a little
But a number of years ago.
Oh,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
Over 10 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And everyone was on board with it. And I came out at the very beginning of the concert and I said, look, we are about to go on a journey together. And I've never done this journey and you've never done it. And I would love us to experience it in the moment together. So that's why you don't have any words in the program. I promise you, you won't need them. But I think that this could be really special if we could just experience it moment by moment together. And it was such, the feeling in the room during that concert was palpable. It was so moving because people were sitting on the edge of their seats waiting to see what would happen
They were
next.
actually listening instead of staring.
They were active listeners.
Yeah.
And that's what we talk about, what Alan and I talk about, what Warren and I have talked about, what we talk about here at Fall Island. I'm much more interested in active listeners. I know that people, not everybody, is into the way I like to do recitals, which is no words in the program. I always offer words after the fact. You can always get if you like the poetry, here it is. But during the concert, I much prefer to have people actually paying attention and listening, which you just don't do equally when you have the program in front of you.
It's true.
We may be a multitasking society, but when you are sitting when you're sitting in a hall that's semi-dark and you're listening to music, we just don't listen to music the same way that people listened to music years ago. We've got so many other things that are preying on our brains that if I can give people just a moment to focus on nothing except what's in front of them, I think that that's a mitzvah.
No kidding.
And I have frequently I will do, if I sing something in other languages, I'll make sure that I recite the poetry in translation. I also encourage, my pianist always does it, whoever is playing with me will do recitations as well, and I encourage this young artist that I work with to do the same. And I've actually had quite a few write to me and send me programs and say, this is what we did, and we did all recitation. And it's recitation for me was a wonderful, it was an eye-opener, because I'll tell you, the moment that happened for me was I was at Tanglewood, and I had curated my first recital for the fellows there. I was working with 6 teams, piano singer teams, and we did all French songs based on Charles Baudelaire poetry. And I had found 9 different composers that had set some of this music. And it was really amazing, because we had, this was also the first year that I ever did my first group poetry reading. So when I come to Tanglewood, the first thing I do with all the singers is we sit down in a big circle with the singers and the pianists, and everybody recites a poem of their choice. And then that's how I get to know them. That's how I'm introduced to them. We do the same thing. Within the first 2 nights of Fall Island, that's what we do. We all sat in this very room, and last night, and every single person read a poem. And it was like 35 poems, and it was heaven from every possible era, walk of life. It was wonderful.
I mean, you really get to know who somebody is by what they choose, how they read, how they communicate.
Absolutely. And that particular summer for that program, we took the best reciters, and they became the reciters for this concert.
Great.
And I remember we had a singer who was doing Les Morts des Amants, and in the concert we had the reciter come out and would do the recitation before, and then immediately the singer and pianist would play. And Phyllis Curtin, God rest her soul, was sitting in the audience, and a friend of mine was sitting next to her. And after the recitation of the poem was read, she turns to her seatmate and goes, "Oh, creepy." And I thought, yes!
But it is a creepy poem.
It's a creepy poem.
Yeah.
But the
People
thing
don't
is,
necessarily know that.
Well, but the thing is that she was given an opportunity to have an opinion about the poetry before she heard the composer's opinion about the poetry. So you're talking about change. You're creating multiple layers when people are listening, because now they're not just listening. Now they're not just counting down lines to get the end of the song. Because anybody who says that's not what you're doing is joking. You can say with all your, oh no, I'm very earnestly, very interested in the poem. Well, the thing is, you don't have the same experience because you hear the piece piecemeal. It's not the same thing. You don't get the totality of the feeling of the piece. And yes, there are people who sit down and diligently read all the poetry before the show starts. I'm sure those people exist. And I love them for it. But giving the audience a chance to become active and part of the process. And the other thing, too, is that when the audience hears the speaking voice before the singing voice, they have a completely different experience. Because everyone in the audience can relate to the sound of the spoken voice, because they all do it. Singing is not necessarily the same thing. Singing is foreign to many people, especially the way we do it. And there's a sense of familiarity. And let me tell you something, when a pianist gets up and turns to the audience and starts speaking, I did a program of French cabaret songs at Carnegie Hall a few years ago. And Warren Jones got up and he did a recitation of Ne me quitte pas.
Well, and he's such a beautiful speaker.
Oh!
Yeah.
When he finished reciting that poem, we did that recital in several different places. We did it in Atlanta too. When he did it in Atlanta, the audience spontaneously burst into applause after the recitation. And then they sort of stopped because they were, and I said, no, applaud. That was magnificent. But to hear this man speak, who's normally, who's normally sitting at the keys, it was amazing, because by hearing him recite that poem, we got his point of view about the poem. And I know for a fact that now he has his students do it. And there's just something that is so wonderful. It's about people getting in touch with song in a new way. Gary, he got me interested in art song because he taught us to do, when we would take his courses, we would do these things called listening logs. And what he would do is he asked us to take a song and examine it from the poetry standpoint, examine it from the theoretical standpoint, and then to listen to and critique a performance of it or give a performance of it.
And it's the perfect thing, isn't it? Because you have just a 3-minute little world.
Brilliant. It was brilliant.
Right?
And we had to do 5 of these in a semester.
Yeah.
And what was great about the way he taught was that he asked us to look at music not only from the standpoint of a performer or from an art song docent, as it were, but to look at the totality of the human experience and how it affects song, how it affects music. So that he wanted to know what's going on in the world when this song is written, what's happening politically, what's happening architecturally, what's happening in the art world, what's happening in literature. That there is a historic element to the creation of music that in large part students of music and even professionals glom over, because it's we very understandably try to get to the song as fast as we can, get to the music as fast as we can. But in order to really be the appropriate vessel for music, we have to have a context.
Yes.
We have to have a social, historical context to it. And then we can bring what we know and who we are to that piece. But if you don't know the foundation of it, you'll never get to the heart of it. I'm not looking at our cultural history to excuse music or behavior. I'm looking at it so that we can understand it and so that we don't repeat it.
Exactly.
That's the notion of history, right? We're supposed to learn from it. So when I started doing this kind of study here at Potsdam College, it totally fired something in my mind, and it made me interested in song in a way that I hadn't been before. Whereas a student, sometimes we look at song as a means to an end. You know what I mean? When we're studying it as students, it's something it's prescribed to us in our as it's prescribed to us as part of our curriculum.
Sure.
But we don't look at it as a way of teaching skills. And it is. It's a way of teaching skills. It's a way of teaching the art of communication.
Storytelling.
Absolutely. Storytelling most of all. I mean, we've lost who we are in terms of an oral tradition society. Where we don't, I mean, the last vestiges of oral tradition now really is comedy. In order for this art form to flourish, which I believe with all my heart, it is completely capable of doing that. In fact, I believe that we are at the brink of a renaissance of song in this country and of recital. Because we have to look at how we present it, we cannot present it the same way.
No.
We can't. And we have to show how it is applicable to every single life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how song is a reflection of who we are as a culture. And that means we look at song from point A to Z. We have to look at all of song. All of it.
Thank you.
You know, it's why I spend an enormous amount of time, looking at the popular songs of the turn of the century. 1890s to 1930 is that time of music making is very important to me, because I believe it's the birth of something new and exciting in this country that eventually leads to art song.
It's like we kind of, in a way, we lost our way for a little while, because I don't think that is so different from what the composers were doing.
No.
In Schubert, Brahms,
No.
you know, Beethoven, von Williams. They were all looking at the popular music of their time.
But
and
but looking at what it's very interesting. You have to look at how our culture consumed music at that time.
yep,
They were making it themselves.
yes,
You know, so you're looking at, in Europe, you're looking at people who are sitting in their parlors and they're having Liederabends. In the United States, turn of the century, you're looking at people who will play the piano and who sit and entertain their families and friends by playing sheet music. And that kind of active music making, that's where we hit a vacuum here.
right.
When people stopped doing that. And I think that's the dangerous place that we're all skating around right now. Two years ago, I taught myself to play the ukulele. I know it may sound ridiculous. I never played an accompanying instrument. I don't play the piano, which is something I regret enormously. But I've tried, and my brain simply does not work that way. And I played flute and baritone saxophone when I was growing up, which you simply can't sing and do at the same time. You can beatbox, but that's about it. And so I started playing the ukulele because a lot of the music that I love was actually written on the ukulele. And so I started doing this, playing and singing and making little videos for my friends on Facebook and Instagram. And I have discovered a whole world that I didn't know existed. There is parlor singing going on in this country, and there's a resurgence of it, and it's around the ukulele.
Or banjo, or guitar.
Or guitar.
Yeah. It's happening. I mean, I can attest to that as well.
It's-
I've been part of it many times.
It's absolutely happening.
Yeah.
People are gathering and singing. I remember it was very interesting. I was spending time with some family in Michigan after I did one of my sing-along concerts. I have a sing-along recital called Sing America, and it's, you know, there are many different recitals in that fall under that head, but basically it's an entire recital that's made up of sing-along. And I always include sing-along in all of my concerts now. I don't care what it is. If it's just a part of the encore, there's going to be sing-along. And I love hearing the sound of an audience sing. Now, in other parts of our culture, that's very popular. If you go to a rock concert, people are going to sing along.
No matter what.
No matter what. And it's wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful to see this thousands of people who have absorbed this music and have taken it on as their own. It's wonderful. So after I did this concert in Kalamazoo, and after Kalamazoo, I went to see some family, and I brought my ukulele, and I sat down with a big extended family, and we just started singing. And the younger members of the family had never done that before. They hadn't just sat around and started singing songs. They were a little shocked by it, but really jazzed by it, you know, especially seeing their grandparents singing songs they didn't know. But all we did, you know, I've done sing-alongs with, just impromptu sing-alongs with lots and lots of people, and just said, hey, here's the song we're doing, whip out your phone, let's look up the lyrics. And people sit there and, you know, use their smartphones and sing along. It's heaven. But to see my family enjoying this, there's nothing like voices being raised together in song. And really, for a very long time, the only place that we did that in an amateur way, you know, was in church or synagogue, you know, in worship. And now I really believe that there is a resurgence of people who are wanting to play and sing. And I think it's magical. And I think that if we in the professional field of song don't take advantage of that, we're making a huge mistake.
I agree so 100% with that. That leads me a little bit to think about also borrowing a clarity of sound and a clearness of diction that sometimes classical singers are accused of not having. And I wonder if that's something that we can also maybe, I don't know. This has definitely not been the case with you and some of my very, most favorite performers, but I wonder if that's something that technically we can borrow from, I don't know, music theater singers or more.
Well, I think, look, what's interesting is that when it comes to classical singing, I was just talking about this with Alan over lunch, we become, as students of singing, very involved in the technique of singing, which is very important.
Incredibly important.
I mean, it's the most important thing.
You can't not do that, yeah.
But we start getting more tuned into the sound of singing, and we lose the sensation of singing.
Of the words.
Of the words and of the feeling that the words engender.
Yeah.
And it becomes this exercise in tones. And part of that is because because art song is written for studied voices, for studied pianists. And it's much more, in all honesty, of course, it's much more difficult. It's more difficult rhythmically and tonally. It asks different things of its performers. It asks different things. I think that it's much easier for classical singers to get lost in the sound because they're honestly trying to make the best sound that they can. But they lose the delicious sensation of text. When I think about really, well, I remember once someone asked Warren Jones why I had good diction. And he said, because Stephanie sings language as if your understanding of what she's singing, her life depends on it. I don't see the point for singing if people don't get what we're saying. I don't see the point. And more to the point is, I don't see the point of listening to people singing words of which they have no opinion and no point of view. I hear more wonderful young singers who perform they perform the crap out of music, but they don't have any. It's so clear that they have no ideas of their own about it, and for me, that was why we started Fall Island Vocal Arts Seminar to begin with. Was that I wanted singers to become autonomous, musically and interpretively autonomous.
Yeah.
Because singers, unlike any other instrument, we are at the mercy of our bodies and the development of our bodies. So our voices don't fully develop until we hit about 35. They're still changing. Now, put on top of that all of the emotional development, all of the intellectual development, on top of hormonal development.
And life experience.
I've often said that when you are an undergraduate and you're studying voice, it's like you walk into a lesson and your teacher every week is looking at a different singer.
Yeah.
And that's the case. And because of that, we are always in this perpetual sense of waiting. And so we wait for our teachers to tell us what to do. And then we wait for our coaches. And if we go into professional life, we wait for our conductors, our directors to tell us what to do. And it becomes very easy to just wait. And what I am more interested in is for singers to take the step to want to be understood because they have something to say. They have something to say. We can't just be empty vessels. I remember Margot Garrett once saying in a group class at Tanglewood, so many years ago now, she said, "Don't show up to a coaching with a blank slate. Never be tabula rasa. Always have some opinion, have something, bring something to the table." And I think that when we are, it's one of the reasons that I wanted to do nothing but songs in English in this program, and why I sing a lot of English myself, is because if I can do that in my own language, I feel like I can translate that into other languages.
Absolutely.
That kind of connection and that need to be understood. And for me, that need is what is going to connect us as a culture and a society. Because that's what we all have in common. Every single living, breathing person on the planet has a desire to be understood. We want someone to understand us.
And to recognize,
that we have something to,
be a
say.
witness.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We're fortunate because we really do, we get up and we really do, we become that. We become the purveyors and also the receivers of witnessing. It's an important thing. And I think that especially during this time in the world, it's incredibly important for us to continually maintain this.
Mm-hmm. I
am not going to go into diatribe preaching against this.
Of course.
This is fabulous. Sorry. I love the fact that I have at my fingertips the information that I need. Mm-hmm. That I can look at books, that I can look at music, that I can ask questions of people that I need to ask. I also think, and I've said recently publicly, I think that we as performers today, if we don't utilize this, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
I feel like we almost have no excuse. We really didn't have any excuse before, but really now there is no excuse not to be prepared.
No. And why, why is it that every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a YouTube account. Mm-hmm. A YouTube, has their own YouTube channel. Why don't we have YouTube channels?
Some do, but
not enough.
Maybe there's not enough, and somehow there hasn't been a way to harness
we can do
the
it.
Fabulousness of it.
I think we
to
can
a
do
broader
it.
Audience.
I think that we can do it.
I
don't see any reason why.
Yeah.
There's some, we're a very interesting, diverse group of people with lots of different ideas. Now, I would argue we're not diverse enough.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps if we reached out to the world the way everybody else reaches out to the world, we could be more diverse.
Yeah. And that is changing because gladly, happily, there is a lot of effort being made to reach out to composers.
Absolutely.
Who from many different backgrounds,
mm-hmm.
and it's gone all across the board, and that's a wonderful thing.
I think we are you and I are exactly on the same page when it comes to right now. We are at a moment that is unknown in history. Wow, we've really come a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, it is...
Every day I hear of a composer I have never heard of before.
Listen.
Writing good music.
We did a master class today. We heard 3 songs. 2 were by composers I didn't even know existed, and they were masterful.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sandwiching a Ned Rorem chestnut. It was heaven. There's so much out there. And what's really wonderful, and what I tell young singers all the time now is there is no excuse for you not to look at this music. It is written for you, about things that mean something to you. It doesn't mean that Brahms and Schubert and Fauré and Debussy, that they're not important. They're important. But if you don't look at what is offered to you now as well, these are the Fauré and Debussy and Brahms and Wolfs of the future.
I also think that, a lot of people shy away from this repertoire. They don't think that the audience will connect with the music in a way, but I think that's completely, it should be on its head. Because of course an audience is going to connect with something that is in their own language, that is speaking something that references
as long as they understand it.
Exactly.
As long as they understand it.
Exactly.
And that's not only on us.
Yeah.
That's not only on us,
Yeah.
that's on the composers too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That it's incumbent upon a composer to write music that can be understood textually.
Right.
And I think that we're still kind of dealing with the misnomer that contemporary music is squeak farty music. It's not. It's not.
Yeah.
It is relevant, it is beautiful, it is sensual, it is exciting, it is thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's full of rage and it's full of excitement. It runs the gamut, and I think I'm so excited to be a part of this chapter of music making.
You talked about making music as a family.
Mm-hmm.
What is your earliest memory of that kind? Did you do that with your family?
My father is a retired jazz musician, so what I heard when I was growing up was mostly tenor saxophone. My dad plays sax, flute, and clarinet, and I played flute and bari sax. My sister played clarinet. Where there was not a lot of singing in my house. We had my first connection with singers was at church. I'm Reformed Presbyterian, and we practice psalmody, so we sing 4-part harmony a cappella psalms. And so I learned a lot about sight reading in church.
Was that in high school? Or
that was in middle school and high school. And I didn't join the chorus in high school until I was in high school. Then I joined the chorus. Actually, I joined it my sophomore year. But I played in the band and the orchestra and all of that. And I started doing musical theater. But our school, Monticello High School, we had a concert band, an orchestra, a stage band. We had a women's chorus and a mixed chorus. We also studied theory and music history. And
there is amazing.
And we did a play and a musical every year. And we had a pit orchestra. So I had my formative years for music were wonderful. And like many of us, it was a place that was a haven to me.
Right. Everyone talks about how music is getting cut in the schools. Mm-hmm. But of course that is the thing that's one of the things that brings people together. Mm-hmm. And if you cut this out, then where do we find this? Is what we're doing the only way?
There is losing this kind of study in school is going to hurt us right in the humanity. It's going to kick us right in the humanity, and we're already seeing it. Mm-hmm. We're already seeing the effects. I think that as a performer, and I was just talking with Alan about this earlier today.
This is Alan
Smith, yeah. That and I mentioned it in the masterclass this morning too. Performers have got to start taking responsibility. We have to be the ones that make change. You cannot expect the machine to do it
anymore.
No. If we want kids to be more exposed to things, then by God, we've got to go out and do it. We have to be part of the solution. We can't wait for somebody to fix it.
Right.
Now, part of the issue with being a performer now is we are in a major flux in terms of performance in this country. We just are. Are the arts dying? No. I refuse to say that. Like I've always refused to say that art song is dead.
No,
and
never.
that recital is dead.
No.
It's never been dead.
It's the most irritating
sentence.
sentence.
It's ridiculous. It's defeatist,
Yep.
for one thing. I refuse to put that out into the universe. What it needs to do is change.
Right.
There is nothing wrong with that. Change is important. If we don't change, if we don't evolve, we don't survive.
So teaching artists who know their background,
Totally.
who've done their research and their history,
Yeah,
communicators, storytellers,
yeah,
these are the things that we are charged with.
absolutely. And the thing is that we have to become more invested in what we're performing and know something about it. I can tell immediately if I'm listening to a singer who's done their research and if I'm listening to one who hasn't. I can immediately.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. I had a wonderful experience working with a young baritone a few years ago, and he was singing a popular American song. And he was doing a beautiful job, but it was vacuous. There was just nothing going on. It was beautiful sound. And I said that to him. I said, I could listen to you sing the phone book, but I just don't give a damn. And I said, can you tell me something about the composer? Now, the song was this brilliant American ballad, one of the last sentimental ballads ever written. And it was written by a man named Paul Dresser. Now, interestingly, Gary Bush, that I was talking about earlier, my art song professor here, is the person who introduced me to My Gal Sal. And My Gal Sal is about a guy who goes to see this woman who is a lady of ill repute. And he loved her, and they had not spoken for some time, and she's dying, and he goes to see her. And he sings this in just this beautiful, beautiful ballad, They called her frivolous Sal, a peculiar sort of a gal. It's just it's a wonderful, simple, beautiful song. But I said, tell me about Paul Dresser. He said, I can't tell you. I said, well, let me tell you about Paul Dresser. Now, whoever wrote Paul Dresser's Wikipedia page is a Paul Dresser fan. There is more about Paul Dresser than Schubert. I mean, it's so comprehensive. But I told him this whole story about Paul Dresser, and I told him about the fact that Paul Dresser was one of the last composers of the sentimental ballad, and that he was a very, very generous man who gave copious amounts of money to people his whole life. He started out playing in brothels, and many of his friends, including the person the song was about, were ladies of ill repute. And that towards the end of his life, he became very ill. He lost most of his money, and no one helped him. No one stepped up. No one was as generous with him as he was with them. And he died penniless. And the last song he ever wrote was My Gal Sal. It was published after his death, and it sold more copies and made more money than any song he'd ever written in his life. And this song was about somebody that he knew. And after I told this wonderful young singer this story, I said, are you ever going to sing this song the same way? They said, no. That's it. Know something, be curious. If I could create a pill that I would give to every young person on the planet, every young student on the planet, it would be a pill that would create curiosity. That's it. That's it. I would want curiosity. I would want everyone to have that gift, to want to know something about something, and to be passionate about something. And that, I think that's where we are. That's what we have to become as artists. We have to become passionate, not only about our own success and what we, and what we say in this, and most of the people that I work with, by and large, that's why they do it, because they love it. We have to not only be passionate because we love it, we have to be passionate so that we can help other people realize that this is as important to us as breathing. that art song, that music, that
It
ballet,
is,
that books, it is essential to life. It is essential to life. And we have to, and I you know, when I was talking today, desperately wanting to help people understand that just the sound of the human voice is so wonderful. The things that we can do with our voices, the things that we can say, what we're capable of changing by virtue of our voices is really something. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we have the gift to learn how to use it, that's something. That's really something. So I'm very hopeful, and I'm very excited and jazzed. I mean, you're getting me at a really good point, because Fall Island Week, I'm on fire. But there's something so comforting to me, because I have met and worked with so many people in the last 10 years that are so determined to make sure that art never leaves us. Because art is what defines us as humans. Technology is what helps us evolve, but art is what shows who we are in here.
I don't even think there's anything else to say. That's just beautiful.
Well, I'm glad.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
Wow, thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. I can talk about this stuff all damn day long, and that is the truth.